Moving on, we're now at chapter 15, the senses. So in the last chapter, we went over the nervous system and the generalities of it all, but let's get into some very particular parts of the nervous system, the senses, which are our main way of kind of bringing in information about the world around us. So what are some things we're going to think about as we go through this? We're going to talk about what sensory receptors are. We're going to look at our sense of taste and smell. And then we're going to take a deeper dive into the anatomy of the eye and how we see, what are some abnormalities that come with the eye, and then also go into the ear's anatomy and how we use our ears to hear as well as maintain balance. So for this first video, we're going to go into the receptors as well as our sense of taste and smell. Future videos will have the eye and the ears in their focus. So when we're looking at sensory receptors, we can classify them a few ways. One of the ways that we can classify them is based on what type of stimulus they detect. So where is that stimulus coming from? For those who detect stimuli coming from outside of the body, like your sense of vision or hearing or taste, those are called exteroceptors because they come from the external environment. And those that detect a stimulus coming from the inside of your body, such as your blood pressure or blood glucose levels, would be interoceptors because they're internal. So it's one way that we can classify receptors, but we can also classify them based on what they detect. So for example, chemoreceptors are going to detect chemicals. They're going to respond to some sort of chemical. A special type of chemoreceptors is the nociceptor, which is the pain receptor. This is a chemoreceptor that detects chemicals released by tissue that had been damaged or killed off. Photoreceptors respond to light. Mechanoreceptors respond to some sort of mechanical force, like pressure. So when you push on your skin, you can feel that. That's due to mechanoreceptors. And thermoreceptors are stimulated by temperature changes, so something hot or something cold. Now, when we're talking about the senses, we're primarily talking about sensation. When we think about our own experience with our senses, we're usually thinking about the sensations that we produce from these sensory receptors. So, sensory receptors are going to respond to some sort of stimulus. Sensation, though, is the conscious perception of that stimulus. So the fact that you are aware of it and have some sort of understanding of it would be sensation. However, not every sensation lasts as long as the stimulus is around. Sensory adaptation is a response from your body, basically saying that they're going to ignore the stimulus because the stimulus is so repetitive that it's no longer considered important by your body. So one example of that would be something like an odor. When you go to someone's house and it's not someone that you go visit very often, sometimes you walk in and you detect maybe a certain cleaner or a certain smell that's in their house that person who lives there doesn't even realize is there. Right? When you go to your own house, you don't necessarily detect an odor or a smell in where you live. But if you were to go somewhere else and visit someone else, or if someone were to visit you, then that odor might be detected by the visitor. This is because for you, in your own house, you're so often exposed to that odor, whether it's a cleaning product you use, or you use candles or diffuser or whatever it is. You're exposed to that odor so much that your brain basically ignores it. But for this visitor who comes in, that's a totally new stimulus. And so they're going to respond to that stimulus. They're going to be able to detect and have a sensation of that smell. So how does sensation occur? We have to have some sort of stimulus. Something has to trigger some sort of receptor. That sensory receptor is going to send information along a sensory nerve, which will go to the spinal cord and then the brain, or if it's along a cranial nerve, straight to the brain. And from there, we can then perceive that information in some form or fashion. Proprioceptors are another category that are very specific. These are mechanoreceptors. So again, they're detecting a mechanical force. And these are very tiny, they're going to cause very tiny actions, little small muscle contractions for muscle tone to maintain your balance and maintain your posture. So these are teeny tiny little mechanoreceptors that are going to help make the small adjustments that you need, as well as the reflex actions that you have within your muscles. Cutaneous receptors are receptors found in the skin. Now, I'm not going to make you memorize all of these different types of cutaneous receptors, but recognizing what we can detect with cutaneous receptors is something that you should know. You can find these both in the epidermis and the dermis of the skin, and these are for detecting touch, pressure, pain, and temperature. When it comes to your sense of taste, you have about 4,000 taste buds on your tongue that help detect the chemicals in the food you eat. And we have 5 main types of chemoreceptors for taste: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami, which is best translated to savory. However, because we only have 5 types of chemoreceptors, our sense of taste is not very refined. Your ability to tell the difference between a lemon and an orange doesn't come from your taste receptors. It actually comes from your sense of smell. 80 to 90% of what you perceive as taste is actually due to your sense of smell. Think about it. The last time you were sick with something like a cold, and your nose was stuffed up and plugged, and you went to eat something, it probably tasted more bland than you remember. It probably didn't taste very good in comparison to when you're healthy. And though for those who are smokers, if the threat of cancer isn't enough to scare you away from smoking, consider the fact that your food will even taste better because your sense of smell will be better off than when you were smoking, and you'll taste your food better. So here we see the taste receptors. You see the tongue there, and you see those papilla, and the taste buds are found on the papilla. They have a little pore in which when you eat and you break down that food, the chemicals from the food you eat are going to touch and interact with the taste cells and then send that information along the sensory nerve fiber. The last sense we're going to go over in this video is your sense of smell. Again, your sense of smell is much more nuanced than your sense of taste. Instead of the 4,000 papilla that you saw on your tongue in your sense of taste, you have 10 to 20 million olfactory cells in your nose. These are going to function kind of similarly in that these are chemoreceptors. They're going to detect molecules and chemicals in the air you breathe in. So you breathe air in. The molecules in the air are going to touch the olfactory cells, and then the olfactory cells will connect up with the olfactory tract, which is part of the olfactory bulb, and then travel straight to your brain, because remember, that is cranial nerve number 1. In the next videos, we'll go over the eye and the ear.